Welcome to yet another video tutorial on XNA. On this one, we're going to be taking a look at more complicated forms of sprite-batch.draw. The reason why we need to look at this is, if nothing else, for your final project, you're going to have a lot of things going on if you want to try to get an A. You're going to have a background scrolling, you're going to have the player, you're going to have the player's bullets, you're going to have the enemies, you're going to have the enemy's bullets, you're going to have life bars. If you want, you might also want to have like score information displayed, so the player can see how many points they've gotten. There's a lot of information to be kept track of, drawing-wise, on the screen, and you have to make sure it's drawn in the right order, so that way you don't have enemies flying under and over life bars and the player disappearing and strange things like that. Got to make sure that everything is drawn in the right order. Now, there's lots of ways of approaching this. One way is just simply to make sure that everything is added in the correct order. Certainly doable in a small-scale project like this, but in a large-scale project, trying to manage the add order of every single object in the game, that's gonna get a little nasty, to be honest. You're better off trying a different method. Now, XNA does, by default, have a basic ordering system. A drawable game component has a draw order property to it. So I can take my two draw components here. Actually, just real quick, let's run this first. Almost forgot that. So we can have a refresher. This is that little eye pain inflicting draw demo that we saw in an earlier video. And currently, this one's being added first. This one's being added second. So remember the draw order. First, the main game will be drawn. So the fighter.png will be the first one drawn. Then we will draw Evil 2. Then we will draw Evil 1. That's how things are set up by default right now. Now I can't change that. Let's say I want to, regardless of my add order, I always want Evil 2 to be added, to be drawn behind Evil 1. Well, I can do dc.drawOrder equals 1 and dc.drawOrder equals 10. And not a darn thing will happen. Oops. Okay, there's more to it than just that. In order to get this draw order thing work, we have to use a slightly more complicated version of sprite-batch.begin. Let's go over to our draw component. And I've actually already got this entered in. Before, we've always been using sprite-batch.begin and an empty parameter list. This time we need a parameter list. We need to specify our sprite blend mode, our sprite sort mode, and our save state mode. Sprite blend mode says that, okay, when you have two sprites that you layer on top of each other, how do you handle that? And in this case, we want alpha blending, so that way we get to take advantage of the alpha channels in the image. The other options, just so you see them, are additive and none. Generally speaking, unless you're going for a very specific visual effect, you always want to have this on alpha blend. Sprite sort mode, that's the one we're interested in. You have a couple of versions here. You have back to front, deferred, front to back, immediate, and texture. To be honest, really the only two you really need to worry about are front to back and back to front. And essentially, this is the choice between, do you want low drawn on top or high drawn on top? If you have front to back, high numbers are drawn on top. If you have back to front, low numbers are drawn on top. I'm going to leave this on front to back. Save state mode. Now, for 2D games, this really has absolutely no relevance whatsoever. This is much more relevant towards 3D games, because when you do a sprite batch, you set certain drawing options on the graphics card, which can really screw with 3D drawing. And so if you say save state mode, you can save that state and restore it. You know, you might think that initially this sounds like a really awesome, great thing. It's not. The performance on saving and restoring states are just mind-bogglingly horrible. You do not want to do that. So you want to leave it a save state mode and none. Even if you're working in 3D graphics, leave it at none. And this will enable our drawing component, which then brings me to the question of, oh, that's right, I think I got my orders messed up here. So coming back here, right, I meant this to be 10 and this to be 1. I got them reversed because I want this one on top, but since this one is added first, I have to, you know, set the draw order to 10. So my mistake there. I had the draw order mixed up. And there we go. Now we can see that the draw order for those two cards have been switched. And you might think, oh, well, hey, that was easy. That didn't really deserve a video tutorial. Yeah, well, it's not quite the cure-all that it might be. Let's look at the other card here. And that is the bottom one, the CM Fighter. Now, what happens if I want to get the CM Fighter involved? Well, now it becomes a little bit trickier. As you see, the game class doesn't have a draw order. That's only in a drawable game component. Only the drawable game component has that. Only the drawable game component knows how to handle that draw order property. And so I can't use that if there's something outside of a drawable game component that I want to have sorted in the correct draw order. So this presents an immediate problem. So this is where the super mega complex version of draw comes into play. So I'm going to take out the old version, comment this one back in, and for the moment I need to change this to, let's have this 1.0f. Remember, high numbers are drawn on top. Now initially you might think, okay, well that should make that draw on top then, because 1 is the highest you can get, assuming I remember to tell you that. By the way, 1 is the highest you can get. Actually, let me go ahead and go through version 7 real quick and all the options that you have. I'll call it version 7 because, well, that's pretty much what it is. We want 7 of 7. Now, there's a bunch of options. Don't try to memorize it because IntelliSense is your friend. So we would need image, because that's what we want to draw. We need a position, which in this case is a new vector 2. I'm just going to put in a 0, 0 here because I'm just demoing this. And it's automatically going to kick me out of 7. An optional, that's this little question mark thing here, means that you can pass in null and it won't crash the program. As it says here, rectangle specifying in texels which section of the rectangle to draw. Use null to draw the entire texture. Null. So in this case, if I only wanted to draw a portion of the rectangle, I can do that. Color, again, this is our tint. Rotation. In radians, please note that this is in radians, how you want to rotate the sprite around the origin. Remember, origin is in the top left-hand corner. Also remember that rotating the sprite is going to screw with your collision detection. So if you're going to be rotating sprites, make sure you keep that in mind. I'm going to, again, leave that at 0.0f. You can also write it as just plain old 0. That works too. The origin, you can choose to specify where, relative to 0, 0, is the origin for this image. This can be useful if you want to have the origin of all of your sprites, say, to be in the center of the sprite. But, of course, we don't want that, so I'm going to use the